Um, Hello, people of YouTube land, those that are part of the Cringe Crew Gaming Community Discord, those that follow Ted and I on Twitch, and those that are listening to this on Spotify or whatever place that we put this podcast on. I am Traductus.
And I'm Ted.
And this is the Cringe Crew Gaming Movie Review Podcast. We just got done with Haley's picks and, classic picks. And this is basically, this week is me taking basically kind of like classic, iconic horror films from like different genres and periods of time, mainly stuff that Ted hasn't seen. So again, that's why certain things that I would probably put in this, I wouldn't, put in there because I assumed Ted's seen The Exorcist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why we're not going to see that. And then also, which I'm pretty sure I stated before, like in the Halloween episode, I didn't pick any John Carpenter stuff because I figured it would be better to have him for like the regular podcast as opposed to just do one film, especially since Carpenter did different genres besides horror, despite predominantly known for being in horror. But so right here is my pick for like the silent era, which is The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. I picked this because although this isn't the first horror film or even the first feature length horror film, Roger Ebert described this as the first true horror film, and I could see where he's coming from with that because besides stuff that was like horror comedies, like the first horror film ever made, The Haunted Castle, directed by George Méliès, right to like the first feature-length horror film, The Student of Prague, directed by Paul Wegener. Those were like horror comedies or like dramas with horror elements. This is kind of, I'd say, like the Black Sabbath of horror films, where it's the place where you go farthest back where you can say, yeah, definitely that's 100% a horror film. At least when it comes with horror films that aren't lost. Because film preservation wasn't a thing until the 1990s, which is a shocker. And that being said, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, released in 1920 in Germany, and I believe 1921 worldwide. The director is Robert Vena, and it had a budget of $12,371 and had a box office return of $4,713. Despite that is initial from like right out the box office. It made more money since then because like it was became like a big huge cult film in the United States. But in its
I just as some background for the audience, okay? When we decided to do October full of horror movies and themes and all this, I specifically said classic movies. And so not only was this movie an awful, frustrating fucking disaster to watch, but the idea that it made $4,000 and you're like, yes, classic. I know you're going to defend it later, but fuck, everything I hear about this movie makes me more angry that we watched it. Please go on.
What was I going to say? Great, you made me lose my train of thought on that. Okay, the story was written by Hans Janowitz and Karl Mayer, both of whom were pacifists following when they met during World War I, and had this as kind of like a originally supposed to be like a script of like anti-authoritarianism. However, when they were when the director and the two writers were making this movie, the studio thought the movie would have been a little too graphic. I mean, not necessarily graphic, but like too jarring for audiences had they not changed the ending, because there is a twist ending. Like originally, everything that happens was not supposed to have like. We'll get into the twist ending when we get into likes and dislikes, just because I don't really want to spoil shit, like, you know, way too early. But there ends up being a twist ending to this, which was made due to, you know, the studio requesting a different ending. That being said, for making the movie, this movie's part of a art movement known as German Expressionism. German Expressionism, a good example of that would be the painting by Edvard Munch. I'm sorry, no, Edvard Munch, and that is the 1893 oil painting, The Scream, which influenced Scream Mask. And everyone that made the set were all expressionist artists, and although the version that we watched, because Jesus Christ, this is scuffed. The music, we didn't listen to like the original, musical accompaniment to this, but they did use music from like different composers of the expressionist movement, and with this film being part of the expressionist movement, it was kind of like a whole entire homage to German expressionism, where you had the visual art style, the audio art style, all wrapped into one, which is why the sets look the way they do. That being said, there has been a couple remakes that have been made from this. This also influenced different movies that came afterwards, such as F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu and Fritz Lang's Metropolis and M. On top of that, this movie also definitely influenced a lot of Tim Burton's style of directing, because he was obviously very, very a huge fan of this movie. And on top of that, despite this movie not having as much cultural relevancy besides inspiration as Nosferatu, because you still see different film footage of Nosferatu and various things such as SpongeBob or various documentaries or things when they talk about Dracula. As a matter of fact, I think Nosferatu is a class in Vampire the Masquerade. But Count of Dr. Caligari heavily definitely influenced the music video for Living Dead Girl by Rob Zombie. As a matter of fact, the whole music video is literally just a reshot remake of the scene where Caligari shows off the sleepwalker Caesar. And with that being said, we're gonna go into cast. We're gonna go from we're just gonna go with the main cast of characters, but we're gonna go from I guess least important to most important. Heinz von Trevadowski as Alan, who is the friend of the main character. He is known for this movie and a couple other movies, especially since he had to flee Germany and go to Hollywood. including playing von. He ended up playing von Bergen in the war drama Private Jones. The reason why he had to flee Germany in 1933 because for obvious reasons, and him being homosexual, a certain government that took over in 1933, you know, highly frowned upon that. So therefore, he had to move to the United States, which will be a very, very common thing that we're going to hear about the cast. Next, we have Lil Dagover as Jane, who is the quote-unquote love interest to Francis, the main character. Lil Dagover was, at the time, the most popular, most recognized film actress of the Weimar Republic. She actually did go to the United States and acted quite a bit there, but during the sound era, she went back to Germany and ended up coincidentally became one of Adolf Hitler's favorite actresses and actually invited her to eat dinner, which she would show up. However, Lil Dagover specifically made sure that she was in apolitical films, and then after the fall of the Nazi regime, pretty much starred in any anti-Nazi film that she could, and literally, like, only took the invite because she was afraid of her life if she said no. Then we have Friedrich Farrer, the main character of Francis. He's mostly known for this movie, although he became a director afterwards, and due to him being Jewish, had to flee his home of Austria-Hungary, and then moved to the United States, and then ended up moving back to Germany at the end of the war. As the sleepwalker Caesar, we have Conrad Veidt. Conrad Veidt is probably best known for most people as the villain in Casablanca, but he also went on to be in different films such as The Man Who Laughs and also the remake of Student of Prague. Easily making him probably the biggest star of this movie. Conrad Veidt ended up fleeing the Germany to go to the United States as well. It wasn't for the fact that he himself was Jewish, but his wife was, and therefore had to flee as well, which gives us to the titular person of Dr. Caligari, Werner Krauss. And Werner Krauss was known for being Dr. Caligari in this, and also Renfield in Nosferatu, or at least like the equivalent of Renfield in Nosferatu. However, unlike everybody else that, tried their best to either, everyone else that fled or, did their best to like work with the situation that they're in, Werner Krauss was very much a unapologetic anti-Semite, joined the Nazi Party, and then after the war had to go through a denazification process to be able to work again because he was banned from acting in movies and even theater.
Saying more things that made me super happy we watched this.
And then as for the director, Robert Weina, he was exiled to Hungary since this film was considered degenerate art, and luckily he passed away before the start of World War II, since the fact that he was also Jewish, he would have risked being deported if if he was alive during World War II, since Hungary was part of the Axis powers during the war. which a lot of people don't really, talk about that. They always talk about the big three. They don't realize that there's actually like two other countries that were also involved on like the other side. That being said, I guess it goes into plot.
Listen.
Unless you want me to actually explain the plot if you're just gonna meme on it.
It's public domain. The thing's been out for 100 years. If you care about the plot, you can go fucking watch it for free on YouTube.
All right. Yeah. Basically, a hypnotist doctor kills people with a sleepwalker. And I guess that goes to like likes and dislikes.
You might as well get your likes out of the way.
All right. And by the way, Ted, I will say this: there's a couple of dislikes I think we're gonna crisscross on. Like
sure.
We're actually gonna share some dislikes.
If you have any of them, it'll be there because my dislikes are the whole fucking thing.
Yeah, I know. As for likes from the movie, I definitely like the expressionist art style, like in the set design. I think the set design was really, really unique and a lot of effort was put into it. I do understand there's certain parts where it's obviously made on like a theater stage, but to me it kind of works with this film. But I just think it's kind of cool, like how different, like you have like windows and like different like weird shapes. There's like different weird angles to like different like road paths. Also, some of the lighting techniques were ended up being used in a lot of like 1950s film noir movies. I also love like, and also certain aspects, there's like shadows painted on the floor. I really like how they definitely went above and beyond to have this movie be part of the expressionist art style, which I kind of sort of miss because like back then, like a lot of like movies coincided with art movements, such as like you had French Impressionism for like music and painting, and then you also had French Impressionism film. The Germans, you had Expressionism. Italians and Russians had Futurism. And, there's like different art movements that, you have different like art mediums, coming together and really on a mainstream level collaborating, which you don't really have anymore. And unless it's like in an art film, it's hasn't really been done in like a mainstream context. But that, as well as I also like the twist ending, because to me I think the twist ending makes the movie a lot more in depth than it is, because with the sets being what they are and how weird the movie is like shot, how weird the title, even down to like the title cards are. The fact that you think throughout the entire thing that Caligari's real, like this whole entire thing was real, then to find out, no, it's just a delusion of a guy in a mental hospital. To me, it kind of like makes sense why everything that is framed is all distorted, and even why some certain things where the main character has like nonchalant, like 100% access to the police, and then also to like doctors at a mental asylum that he's talking to that are totally believing him right away. It's all, the mind and an imagination of like a fractured, distorted mind of a delusional man, which to me I think is rather interesting, like how the movie sort of kind of uses like as a frame for like dream logic, even though yes, this was like a tacked on ending to put on there, because originally, this all was supposed to be real, as in like, Caligari wasn't a hallucination, but the fact that it's able to do that, you can basically retroactively piece everything to kind of together, like, wow, this all kind of makes sense because like the guy's freaking delusional. Um, I do say I do like the modern soundtrack that's on it. I would have preferred like the soundtrack that I heard when I first watched this movie. Um, but I don't think it was, notably like that terrible. I also will say that the acting in this is um rather over the top, which I don't mind because it is a silent film. You do have to act more with like motion than, words, so subtlety is not typically a thing, but I do like how certain actors look legitimately freaking terrified, especially like Alan's death scene. Like he's just like has this base of horror, and honestly, even though it's in silhouette, the death is actually kind of freaking brutal. But that being said, I think most, besides like the set design, the art style, how it's shot, I do appreciate this is kind of the origin for like a lot of horror tropes, such as a killer that's going after one by one. The fact that you have a deranged authority figure, or and also like a twist ending. I like how there's like certain elements of that have been used and carried over that still survive today. That being said, unless Ted doesn't have any likes or anything to add positively, what?
You're goddamn right, I don't.
Which I figure you at least appreciate the set design, but
I mean, the set design was fine and all, but it was still like. You mentioned that there was like parts of it that looked like a theater stage, and honestly, I thought those were the better parts because they catered to the acting style. The fact that like all of my context is through big, bold action. Everything should be visible. I shouldn't have to look around. Like, I get that it was neat and novel and all of that, but like, it hasn't been fucking novel since the goddamn 1920s. So no, it frustrated me. To start on dislikes, though, I do want to start with it predates tropes. So tropes tend to exist for a couple of reasons. The first is that an idea is good enough that it gets reused and somebody says, I can do that better, and then they do it again and again and again until it's happened all of the time. And then other reasons are like, hey, this sucks so bad we can make fun of it because it's a very recognizable thing. I don't think predating tropes is a good thing when there are so many tropes. Like, the story fucking literally ends with, and it was all a dream, except it was a hallucination. And so just thousands and thousands and thousands of iterations of that. If they all stem from here, dude, I want to hit my head through my fucking desk until the desk bleeds. Look, on its most baseline level, this movie was horribly unwatchable for a handful of reasons. Partially because it's the fucking 1920s. But the biggest and most difficult part to watch here was the idea that, like, when you watch a show with subtitles, the idea is so that you can read what is being said. In a movie that has no sound, right? We have to rely on being able to read the title cards. You fucking can't! The font is fucking awful. Like, not only did they build a shitty fucking movie, right? They even made it shitty for you to read the shitty things happening in the shitty fucking movie. It's goddamn fucking impossible, dude.
Yeah, and what sucks is that it is dialogue heavy, which cuts into like a lot of action that is happening. There's a lot of things that they could have just shown you as opposed to telling you on the title cards. And I did watch, and when I first watched this, those title cards were different. They were actually legible, and there was less of them. I just chose to do like a print that was like, I picked a print that was like a little bit more accurate to what was shown at the time, if that makes sense.
I just think that, like, even if you go back and watch old like Charlie Chaplin footage, right? Like, it wasn't driven by dialogue. When dialogue happened, it was very short, very sweet, and wasn't necessarily like super essential for the most part. It was driven by what you could see. And because this is just like, hey, it's the talkies before we can talk. Like it's just fucking stupid for its craft, right? Like so much of this, I recognize that Stahlman, like you have an idea about the expressionist art that's in it, right? And I'm not trying to like devalue that because it's just not something that I appreciate, but also like the telling of this story would have been a better radio story just based on the way that the dialogue drives the story. The visuals don't necessarily become important, but then when you can't hear dialogue, you can't read the fucking dialogue. The sets don't goddamn matter. It's wasted on a terrible medium. Like it's just a bad way to express what it wants to do.
I'd say it's a valid point because if you can't read the title cards, it's really, difficult to know exactly what's going on. I also think like the excessive amount of title cards really does like bog this movie down, especially in the middle.
And to further that, like I think the way that the music carries the movie, I know you said that it wasn't necessarily the original score, right? But to whatever extent this has been redone or retouched or whatever authenticity they tried to provide, I obviously can't speak to it, but in the format that we watched it, I think the music does an awful job at carrying things too. I agree. I think that there are a lot of points where they use like a creepy, eerie, intentionally distorted music in places that don't need it, like that are strictly exposition. And then I think that there are certain scenes where it's just like, well, if the music gets loud, this is important. It doesn't have to be good. It only has to be loud. And it just, I don't know. Like there is nothing about this movie that carried itself in a positive direction for me. Like I have genuinely nothing positive.
I do have a couple other gripes I have. And that is like how some of the title cards are shot. A lot of them are too big for the frame. So like they, I guess pan vertically down for you to read it. To me, I think like they could have just used a dissolve and just had it like completely on a regular frame. Mainly for the fact that, dissolves existed.
Well, and the idea that if you're again going to be driven by narrative, use the fucking radio. Like I joked at the beginning that this only made $4,000, right? But like people consumed most media via the radio. Like that was where you got news. It's where you got entertainment. Like just everything came through the radio. So the idea to make this a motion picture, which is essentially just a shitty high school fucking slideshow, like it just drives me nuts that that's the way that they chose to do things. Just awful choice after awful choice.
Yeah. I mean, despite me liking this film, I will say that Ted has legitimate like gripes with it. And I also say another thing I have a gripe with this print is that I don't know what it is, if it was like the restoration of just like this Kino restoration that we saw, but like certain like ink filters that were used like were very oversaturated, that I don't remember them being that oversaturated. And on top of that, there are parts where there's like a lot of like jittery jumpiness, like as if like the film skipped, because you'll have like some characters that are just like well,
it's because it's genuinely a slideshow. Like I had fucking my high school biology teacher's slideshows were more production value than this.
But like and that's something that I didn't see like in previous prints, but I saw in this. So like the restoration could have done a better job of the freaking restoration on there, because I highly doubt the movie wasn't that choppy when it was released. But that being said, again, I will say this, like, it's not really for anybody, but if you're like into like silent movies and are interested in seeing like, early stuff from horror, I think it's definitely worth the watch. Ted would disagree.
Yeah, I mean, the things that it influenced, I think, are more important to horror's history than this. Like, if it came from here, great. But I think that you can skip this one and get more entertaining and more like tolerable pieces of media.
I mean, I agree, especially from like the silent film era. But that being said, that's all that we really have for this one.
Yeah. Normally, I feel like we'd go into more detail, but it's just everything bad is way more easily summed up this way. As always, thanks for hanging out for this one. You can watch more movies with us in the Discord. The link is in the description. If you're interested in more of our own personal content, you can also find us both on Twitch, Stahlman at Traductus and myself at Ted Green Eagles. And I think that's going to wrap it up for this one. We'll see you here tomorrow.
Yep. Tomorrow's going to be Dario Argento's Suspiria. Hopefully Ted likes that one, because that's in my top 2 favorite horror films.
Oh, boy. All right.
Yeah.
We'll see you all here tomorrow. Have a good one.